Welcome to the Cause Effect 4.0, the podcast decoding how technology sparks real-world change. What if AI isn't just powerful, but the only solution for some of humanity's toughest challenges? From saving premature babies' sights to detecting Amazon deforestation in days. I'm your host, Celina Lee, and today I'm thrilled to welcome the visionary answering just these questions. Juan Lavista, Chief Scientist and Lab Director of Microsoft's AI for Good Research Lab. Juan leads a powerful team of data scientists, AI experts, and researchers in data science, machine learning, and AI. Together, they're tackling those challenges through groundbreaking projects in AI for Earth, AI for humanity, AI for accessibility, AI for health, you name it. He's also the author of AI for Good, which was released in January last year, a book that proves AI's power to solve what humans can't do alone. Welcome to the podcast, Juan.
Thank you, Celina, for the invitation.
As you know, I'm a huge fan of your book, and we're very happy to share the good news about AI for Good. So starting with that, your book, written with William Weeks, AI for Good, profiles 29 diverse projects to inspire others. What inspired you to write the book, and what was behind your decision to, especially something that I appreciate, is how did you decide to teach by example as opposed to staying at these high level, theoretical discussions about AI versus as well the very technical discussions that we're coming to be more familiar with?
Yeah, so the whole idea of our lab in many ways is different than other labs out there. Is in the sense that we are applied researchers, and we are very proud applied researchers. And there's a difference between being a researcher and applied research. In applied research, you're looking for a problem, and you're looking for the best tool to solve the best hammer to solve a problem. In research, sometimes we are trying to build new hammers or new tools, and of course they complement very well. But like I mentioned, I think in the book at one point. I came to the realization that it's not that we don't have enough people building hammers, but we certainly don't have enough people looking for ways to use those hammers. And that's basically what drove us to build the AI for Good lab. Early in the lab, we realized that it was difficult for us when we were sitting with teams of experts that were trying to solve problems. One of the easier ways for us to look for how we could help them solve the problems was to show them examples of things that we were doing. Even if we are very different. For example, in one of the projects, I remember we were trying to look for. We were actually working with an organization that was trying to look for for evidence of war crimes in Syria. This was 5 years ago, and one of the projects that we show was the work we were doing on detecting whales underwater using acoustic data. So they asked the questions like, hey, if you can do that, could you actually detect acoustic signal of different type of weapons that are not allowed by the Geneva Convention? And I say, well, yes, of course, as long as there's a particular fingerprint that would allow us to detect that, and you have human labelers, the answer is likely yes. So through the history of the lab, it became really evident for us that one of the best ways for us to have an impact was first to create the project. And in order to create the project, we needed to show what we could do with these tools. So that's the whole idea of show by example. And that's what drove us to write the book to begin with, and to select some of these examples in the book. So, yes.
Definitely. You mentioned something about talent, and that's interesting that's part of what started the lab. You've said that AI talent is locked in finance and tech, leaving a huge gap for organizations that are tackling global challenges. So in what ways are you bridging that gap with governments, with NGOs, the ones who are really on the front lines? How do we solve this talent gap?
Yeah, and that's another thing that we realize is that the world has a lot of big problems, and you have amazing organizations that are trying to solve those problems, whether these are nonprofits or governments, or in some cases, even for-profit organizations. But what we realized very early on was not all of these problems can be solved using data or AI or technology, but there's a subset of these problems that you can help. But we realized that majority of the people like us, the people that work in tech companies, majority of the people that have the skills, like AI skills, are working either in the financial industry or on the technology services industry. And I say the bulk of the people working on AI are working on this space. So we realized there was a gap. And in order for us to make a difference, um, we could donate our our time to help solve those problems. That's basically the spirit of the lab. The lab is a complete philanthropic effort that Microsoft has. Every big organization out there has usually like a corporate responsibility organization. They do some philanthropy. We realized that there was much more impact for us to donate our time than basically to donate money to some of the things. Because even if you donated money, these organizations usually did not have the structure to hire or retain the talent that was needed to solve these problems. So yeah, that's basically the talent aspect that we see.
Yeah, so going back to the book, it was, I mean, so exciting to see kind of the real range of different case studies that were highlighted, everything from detecting diseases that cause blindness in infants to tracking giraffe migration to even tracking human migration. So, of all these case studies, which of the case studies do you feel really embodies that spirit and the mission that you have at AI for Good?
It's difficult to select. This is like asking a parent to choose the child that they like the most. Uh, there are some projects out there that however, they have a special thing for me because I work in some of these projects as an IC, so a lot of these projects are made by, like, are done by people on my lab. There's a few projects that actually I did myself, and of course, those for me are more like more special. Every project there has was selected there was for a reason, and these are great impactful projects. uh, the retinopathy of prematurity for me was like one of these problems that I didn't even realize that existed. Retinopathy of prematurity is the leading cause of blindness around the world. um, is also a disease that didn't exist in the world a few decades ago, and now we're suddenly seeing a huge increase across the world. First, we saw it in the global north, now in the global south, and the challenge for the world. This is the number one cause of preventable blindness in children around the world. ROP. And the reason this we are seeing this increase is because of good news, in the sense that um, these these ROP affects very small premature babies that before they didn't have a way to survive. Now, thanks to improvements in health and healthcare in general, more and more of these babies are surviving, but they are not ready to live in the planet yet. They are very small premature babies, and their retinas are not fully developed. And in some of these cases, they suffer ROP. When you have a severe case of ROP, the doctors have a very small window between 24 to 48 hours where if you don't do an intervention, the baby will be blind forever. And this is some of the famous cases of ROP. For example, is Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder is blind due to ROP. Uh, and one of the things that when you look at the data, the world has only 200,000 ophthalmologists, from which only 10,000 are pediatric ophthalmologists. And you have millions and millions of premature babies that are born every year. Every one of these babies needs to be screened for ROP. And even if you did some magic and you physically distributed these pediatric ophthalmologists perfectly evenly around the world, which will be impossible, but let's say for a minute that you could do that. And even if you tell them that they need to work 24/7 on this problem of screening, there will not be enough pediatric ophthalmologists to do the screening. So this is a problem where it became really evident that having more humans doing this would not solve it. Uh, so this is a case where AI is not just a solution; is the only solution we have. We were working with amazing doctors from Hospital Italiano in Buenos Aires, from doctors in Colombia, doctors in Mexico, um, and they have dedicated their life to help prevent these diseases. It's very sad for a doctor look at a problem like ROP where they know that it's completely preventable by an intervention, but they don't have enough of them to treat and diagnose every kid.
Right.
So we've been working with them, and again, our models collectively, these models that came from collaboration with them, they are described in the book. It was published in JAMA, and they are an amazing use case where we show the world that this technology can do a pretty good job doing diagnostics of ROP. So
One of the things that I also really appreciated about the case studies is that in some ways, you've done a good job of painting a very realistic picture about what it means to implement AI solutions in the wild, in real life, in real under-resourced, environments, and just in general, like those, the last mile problems of deployment, the even fighting the temptation of being a hammer looking for a nail rather than starting with the actual problem, looking for the right partners. All of those things are very real. And I feel like, we've also experienced it as Zindi. I'm wondering, what are your, when you think about when you talk about AI, like, and you talk on all of these different forms, what are some of the biggest misunderstandings or misconceptions about what AI really is and what it can really achieve? What are the realities of the opportunities as well as the limitations in AI making people's lives better?
yeah, so for us, the one that I think becomes more evident is a lot of times people have irrational expectations on how these solutions can work and what problems they can solve. Correct, and I think we try to describe that in the book. I always say it's much easier to solve a problem in a paper than solve it in production. And that has also become evident. Like a lot of the problems that we were trying to solve are problems that, in theory, if you read a scientific paper, that problem has been solved like 10 years ago. But when you look at it in production, nobody uses the solution, and there's a reason why they don't use the solutions, because a lot of times these solutions don't work. They work on theory, they don't work on practice. So that there's a human element, there's a data element. So I think it's important to be as realistic as possible on what type of solutions and what type of problems we can solve. Um, in the last 3 years, we started the lab like 6 years ago, but in the last 3 years, the with the release of by OpenAI of ChatGPT, clearly AI became a much more important topic for the world, in the sense that um, 4 years ago AI was kind of another topic, correct? Like it was not something that people were describing and talking every day. Now AI, you can read the paper every day, and there's always something about AI. With that, we see unfortunately, a lot of misconceptions about AI. These large language models, thanks to the fact that they are trained on human knowledge, they are trained on the open web, that is the most important repository of human knowledge in the world. They are that's the most important data set that the world has. Um, and because of that, it's very powerful, but people, a lot of times, they believe that it has powers that it doesn't have. Correct? Like there's discussions where AI is conscious, for example. There's discussions where, well, like AI will use their agenda to conquer the world. Like we have to remember that behind the scenes, these are models that are basically doing is just multiplication of matrices. Correct? Like there's no
Yes,
agenda models.
yes,
And I always say, well, it's very difficult to define what conscious means. But I always say, well, if you believe that if Excel allow very big formulas, which it doesn't, like at least not that size, you could potentially run a large language model like ChatGPT from an Excel formula. I always say to people, well, if you don't believe that an Excel formula is conscious, a bigger formula should also not be conscious. Correct. So I think it's important for people to understand the logics of this, and we also recognize that they're still very powerful. Like large language models provides an amazing opportunity for us to even have bigger impact. And there's certainly a lot of issues that can come up with the fact that we're using these models. but people need to understand how they work and what is realistic and what is not. So
Yeah, I mean that actually leads into one of my other questions is, you've I don't when did you found the AI for or when did the AI for Good Lab start at Microsoft?
we've been working on AI for good projects for the last 10 years, but there was no
Yeah.
lab at that point. We had different teams
Okay.
working on contributing. So one of my I work in Bing, I work with Xbox, with Windows, and but I always dreamed the idea of one day retiring and working on for good projects, correct? Like, and so I would volunteer from time to time from some projects. One of my colleagues had lost a child to SIDS. SIDS is sudden infant death syndrome, and is the number one cause of death of babies between 1 month to 1 year old in the U.S. and in a lot of countries too. And he was doing an amazing job trying to raise awareness about SIDS, and I said, well, I want to help, but is there a way that we can help from our own skills? So he put us in contact with the people from Seattle Children's Hospital, and we met with them and we started working with their data. And it became really clear in the first meeting that there was a lot of things we could do to help them. Eventually, we showed this to my manager, to Brad Smith, and to Satya, and to a lot of people in the organization, and they really liked the idea, and that basically what drove the
Wow.
creation of the.
That's
That happened
amazing.
a bit over, yeah, almost 7 years ago. So a bit
Wow.
over 6 years ago,
Yeah.
and this was before of the era of GPT, but clearly there was a lot of value already on AI. So
That's what I was going to say is that, you've seen the whole evolution and I guess, yeah, I mean, how have one of my favorite case studies in the book is about the bird calls and using LLMs to recognize unique and new bird sounds, and it just demonstrates kind of the breadth of ways that LLMs as a foundation, like have so many different use cases even outside of a chatbot, let's say. So, yeah, I mean, how do you see kind of the the world, your realm changing of AI for good changing and evolving with LLMs? And then I guess on the other flip side is, how concerned are you about bias, or what kind of impact does it have that the LLMs, as you said, have been trained on the universe of internet data, which leaves out everyone who's not necessarily contributing to text on the internet in English or in the most common languages?
yeah, so a few things. I think so. Large language models are an amazing technology. Generative AI and large language models open up many more opportunities that we before we couldn't think that we could solve. Correct, and that start with majority of human knowledge is stored in open web and in text and images. That is unstructured data that before LLMs it was very difficult to manipulate. Well, like people have dedicated their life to try to uh, get some value out of text, and it was very difficult. Correct. So with large language models, for the first time, we were able to leverage these to the point that, and this brings an amazing power to the point that I think we're just using very small amount of that power yet. Like I think there's much more we can do with large language models, and that's very clear to me. And but yeah, this started by the fact that we had to go back and say, hey, are there any like a lot of problems that we thought that we couldn't solve now thanks to large language models we are able to tackle. So that's
Wow.
number one. uh, and again, this is just scratching the surface. I would say almost every day there's researchers inside my lab and also outside the lab that are finding ways to use and leverage large language models to solve other problems. So I think that we are just beginning this journey, and it's an amazing journey. You mentioned about bias. Yes, of course, I'm really worried. I would say, um, it's particularly if you're training data from humans, we need to understand that we as humans we have a lot of biases, correct? And the data that the open web is a reflection of that. You have bias because we are humans, and as imperfect as we are, a lot of times our opinions and our values are biased, and we need to recognize that. There's also something exactly what you mentioned is that uh, uh, the, the open web is 50% of the open web content is in English.
Yeah.
You have 5% of the population in the world, English is their first language. So the fact that it's 10 times that clearly reflects on the fact that the open web is biased towards English speaking countries. And the reason that happens is because that's from the era of the internet. At that point, when Tim Berners-Lee started the World Wide Web, uh, a lot of that was mainly to share research, and research was shared in English. And that, so the early versions of the open web was mainly supporting languages like English. We have to remember that it wasn't that far away, far ago, where people allow other type of language, at least from a writing perspective. So anyway, long story short, um, that's one of the biases we have, is that one. There's bias on the sense that sometimes even when we don't think, the data will still have bias, and we need to understand those biases. The great thing about AI from a more positive side is that it's difficult to understand bias in sometimes it's difficult to measure bias in humans, because the bias of every person will be a bit different, correct? The bias that everybody has some bias.
Yeah.
The bias that you have will be different than me.
But it manifests
If you have,
different.
let's say, exactly, if you have like different, for example, different doctors, everyone will have their own bias. It will be very difficult for them to recognize. I have biases, and I don't see, like, it's difficult for me to recognize sometimes those biases. The great thing about AI is that once you have the model that is trained, um, you can query the model, and you can detect the bias from the model. It doesn't mean that you will be able to solve it, but at least you can detect it. And once you detect it, you have ways to try to mitigate as much as possible. And a lot of the companies that are working on this space, that's a lot of the efforts that they provide. Uh, is regarding try to mitigate those biases. But it's clearly
Yeah.
like in AI and LLM in general, uh, this is one of the most fundamental problems that we have in the industry today. So
We actually did have a project as Zindi with the responsible AI team and Microsoft at one point. But I'm curious, like, is there anything that you want to share or highlight on responsible AI, or, looking at this topic that you're doing?
yeah, that's one of the things that I had to give a lot of credit for Microsoft on that, in that we had like an office of responsible AI for many years, like even before our lab, this effort was there, and the whole idea was, for every project we have, we need to go through a great steps or great guidelines from a responsible AI perspective. um, and every project we have needs to go through those guidelines, correct? Like, for example, let me give you an example. Like we are training this ROP model. The ROP model, we were able to train it using data in Latin America, mainly from children in Argentina, in Colombia, in Mexico, and then we make. But of course, these. That does not represent the world population, which means that that model will likely not work well in Africa. And we are actively working now in a few countries in Africa to understand that, correct? Like, not because you train a model, that means that the model will work in every country. In some cases, might, in some cases, will not. For example, we know for a fact that skin cancer detection models, a lot of these skin cancer detection models are usually trained in the US in Caucasian data, because that's the population that first usually go to a lot more to doctors, particularly to skin doctors. Usually that's also the population that suffered the
Yeah.
most. And so, which means that a lot of times these models are usually trained majority of the data in Caucasian, which means that they will not necessarily generalize to African Americans or Latinos or Asians in the population, which means that, and that doesn't mean that the model is not working. It will work well for that population. From a responsible AI perspective, what is critical is, first, to recognize that. Second, to make sure that people are not using these models in out of distribution population, and most important, to see if these organizations can improve the data so it's more representative of the whole world. No.
I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, sometimes the bias is not like bias as in something that is nefarious or inherently wrong. It's then knowing how to responsibly use the models, understanding the limitations, right?
Yeah, I would say majority of the use cases that we have, people usually think about bias or something nefarious. A lot of times that with the bias that we see are not necessarily nefarious, but it
Yeah.
happens there, correct?
Yeah.
Uh, uh, I think I have this example. I think no, I have this example in the book where I say that a long time ago there was a study that like showed that the left-handed people in the world were dying younger than right-handed people, and explained that the reason this would happen is because we have a world that is mainly built for the right-handed people, correct? Which is true. Like the world is made for majority of the tools that we have are made for right-handed people. But when you look at the data, we realize that these researchers didn't consider there was for a long period of time there was a discrimination against left-handed people, and because of that, parents would force their kids to be right-handed. They will actually take their left hand and they will put it in a way that they couldn't use, so they would force to write with the right hand. And I know that because my grandfather was one of them. He was forced to be right-handed. Eventually,
Wow.
eventually people stopped doing that for a very good reason, and this generated an artificial increase in the left-handed population. And that artificial increase is the one that gives us the illusion that the left-handed people are younger, when in reality that's not the case. The challenge from an AI perspective is that if you use that data today to train a model for a life insurance company, and you're trying to predict how many years this person will live, and you have one of the features whether the person is left-handed or right-handed, the model will tell you that left-handed people will die younger and you should charge them more because of that. When in reality that's
Right.
not the case. Yeah.
Right.
One of the most important aspects as a data scientist is to try to find any potential bias in the data, uh, and try to mitigate for that. And again, it's a very difficult problem, but it's a problem that I think is certainly very important for us to recognize. So.
Definitely. Um, okay, yeah. Going back to another of the case studies that I thought was interesting. So, you had both a case study from the US of mapping poultry farms, and then you also had a case study I think it was in India, mapping solar farms. And I mean, both of them were looking at different aspects. But what resonated with me was I noticed that you used high resolution satellite imagery in the US context, and in India you use Sentinel-2, which is a free and lower resolution, open source satellite data set, which is really important. I mean, even in the African market, like as Zindi, we use Sentinel-2 all the time. It's a really incredible resource. And so, but I was wondering, I mean, I think a lot of data science projects, even before the LLMs, like a lot of the data science projects and AI for good projects rely a lot on satellite data. What is your take on this? Like, where should we actually be pushing in this? Like, is it a matter of finding more innovative ways to use the data that is available in certain contexts? Should governments and institutions also be trying to collect, and have their own high resolution data sets that cover their countries? Where do you think the focus should be, and what do you think the actual implications are at this point?
So very early on in the lab, we realized that a lot of the projects that will fail because of access to data. Either the data didn't exist, or there was not enough data, and that became really evident that satellite data provided an amazing power, because not only we had access to the data, at least in the case of data like Sentinel-1, but another thing that what became evident was that if you could solve a problem in a particular area, uh, there was good likelihood that you could expand to the whole world. So it would scale in an amazing way. So satellite data is one of the most important data sets out there. Um, we have to give a lot of credit to organizations like NASA to having free satellite data available to the world. Like they bring an amazing superpower to the world, correct? And the European agencies also have free satellite data. Like that's people's unfortunately people don't give enough credit to these data sources. Um, a different type of satellite data can help solve different problems. Um, in some cases, you will need very high resolution satellite data. In some cases, you can work a solution with a free satellite data. So Sentinel-1, for example, has a 15-meter resolution. You have, which means that every pixel is a 15 meters square. In the case of very high resolution, like something that you could get from private companies like Planet or Maxar, you could get to like zero point 0.5 meters or even 0.3 meters resolution, which means that 30 centimeter or 50 centimeter. With those problems, with that type of data, you can solve a problem. You can find a car. At 15 meters, you can see a city, but likely not see a particular structures in the city. So I would say it will depend on the problem. We also need to understand that some of these satellites have different type of revisiting. So, for example, in the case of Sentinel, you have a picture of the Earth, of every point in the Earth every 6 to 7 days, or in some cases 10 days. In the case of very high resolution satellite data, those satellites are tasked, which means that you need to put the satellite on top of a place and then take pictures, but you don't have weekly or daily data. Planet, we work very closely with Planet. They have these satellites that have every point on Earth every day. So the revisit is every day, and we take that's a 4 meter data. That's another amazing data source. They actually, the next version of the project that you described on looking at solar farms and wind farms in India was we use similar algorithms, and instead of just doing India, we did the whole world. But instead of using Sentinel, we actually use Planet data that was a 4 meter data. So satellite data provides an amazing power. I do think people don't understand the value sometimes, the value for this data. I wish and I hope that more and more countries realize the value and they can start contributing to organizations on their countries, because it clearly can make a big difference. No, so
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious, in what ways has this book been an ecosystem builder? Because, for me, I think that it has injected a very different, unique perspective in, AI for good is this, now this global movement. There's a lot of actors playing in it, but I think that this gave like a very uniquely empathetic, optimistic, but still realistic perspective. And I'm curious, like, how has the reception been to the book? What kind of feedback have you gotten?
I have got very good feedback. I think the number one impact is to show that people can use AI to solve very important problems. We have, through the book, we got to know many other organizations that maybe were not aware of the projects that we were working. So it has been very beneficial for us. And we know a few professors that are using it to teach some courses, which for us was an amazing value. So we're very happy with the reception of the book.
When I first read the book, I thought, okay, if we could just distribute this book, then Zindi would have many more projects as well. I was also thinking about, so you had mentioned that you're from Uruguay, you're from South America, part of, the so-called global South. And I was wondering, because we have a community of people from all over the world, from Africa, from South America, from Asia. Um, what advice would you have for aspiring young people out there that are, trying to develop their career in AI, and especially in AI for good? And also, what importance do you see in having these more diverse perspectives and different perspectives in this space?
I think we live in an amazing time, and I think there's a huge amount of opportunities out there. There are very important problems out there, still a huge amount of problems that the world needs to get solved. Uh, I think that AI and coding in general, but AI in particular, like provides an amazing superpower for people. So I would definitely tell people that this superpower is a skill that everybody needs to have. It has become much easier thanks to technologies like large language models. Almost everyone can become a developer. Like you can develop in your own language, correct? Like you no longer need to learn. Sometimes, for some reasons, for some projects, you no longer need to have like a very good understanding of technology like Python, but you can use large language models to use your own language, whether it's English, Spanish, Mandarin, or almost every language. You can interact with large language models. I think is an amazing superpower that can help people build careers, can help people solve problems. And like I mentioned, I think it's very rewarding to use this technology to help society. And I think it's something that I will highly recommend to anybody. So,
Yeah. Do you have a dream AI for good project that you still haven't been able to do yet?
I'm very passionate about the health world. We live in a world where half of the world, 4 billion people, do not have access to doctors, and I do think that we have seen already that a lot of this technology. There was a paper that was published in JAMA over 2 years, almost 2 years ago now, where they show that at that point GPT-4o was answering questions from and they were comparing questions from to doctors and questions to GPT-4o, and not only GPT-4o was answering more accurately, was actually showing more empathy. This is being judged by other doctors. And it doesn't mean that this technology is ready to solve that problem, but it shows that it has the potential to solve that problem. So I think that from a healthcare perspective, AI provides an amazing opportunity. I think we're just scratching the surface for the power that this technology can have to society. So I'm very looking forward to see much more of that.
So maybe you're already working on it, but I'm curious if you were to write a book to follow this book, and also given the current dynamics and the changes since you first wrote this book, what would it be and why?
So I am finishing a book we're going to be publishing in the
Oh,
next few weeks. It's called Degrees of Change. This is part of our AI Economy Institute. So last year we decided to open, as part of the AI for Good Lab, we decided to open something called the AI Economy Institute that is looking at ways where we can help diffuse the AI technology around the world. That's our number one problem. And as part of that, we are looking at how the first book, that is called Degrees of Change, is related to how AI and large language models are changing education, the good, the bad, and the ugly of that. And so the book, we're planning to announce it in the next few weeks. That's basically our plan. So
wow. I didn't know, but I guess the timing is great.
yes.
Um, okay, well, Juan, thank you so much for being here with us. I am just thrilled that I got this chance to talk to you, and I'm such a fan of your book. So, congratulations on all the great work you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Celina, for the invitation.